Hello, welcome to Post Colonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and today we will continue our conversation about Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Chapter 3. Now, please bear in mind that we have already covered Chapter 1 and 2, and you can watch it chronologically so that you get to this point after having watched and read the first two chapters. And by the end of chapter 2, Freire has already explained to us the difference between the banking system and the problem-posing system. When you read chapter 1, you already know that the ultimate project of every human being is to gain their full humanity. We already also talked about Erich Fromm's influence on Freire's idea of the human subjectivity itself. He also gives us a wonderful account of difference between mere activism, right, or mere philosophizing things. In this chapter, he starts with his discussion of dialogue, right, its significance, what is it, right, and how is it important for a revolutionary movement to change the world, right? And so, as always, I'll first read the text and then we'll talk about it, and this launches us into probably the most significant chapter of the book. So let's read it a little and then talk about it. So here we go. As we attempt to analyze dialogue as a human phenomena, we discover something which is the essence of dialogue itself, the word. But the word is more than just an instrument which makes dialogue possible. Accordingly, we must seek its constitutive elements. Within the word, we find two dimensions, reflection and action, in such radical interaction that if one is sacrificed, even in part, the other immediately suffers. There is no true word that is not at the same time a praxis. Thus, to speak a true word is to transform the world. So let us look at the footnotes. By the way, this is one of the most amazing resources on the book available online, and I'll post the link to the description. So the first footnote, he gives us his definition of word. Word is action and reflection. They both come together to find word, which is equal to work and praxis, right? Now, sacrifice of the action part of the word reduces our actions to mere verbalism, right? Sacrificing reflection makes it into what Freire calls the mere activism, right? And so these are some important things to keep in mind, right? And I will talk more about this transforming the world through the word. An unauthentic word, or one which is unable to transform reality, results when dichotomy is imposed upon its constitutive elements. When a word is deprived of its dimension of action, reflection automatically suffers as well, and the word is changed into idle chatter, into verbalism, into an alienated and alienating blah. It becomes an empty word, one which cannot denounce the word, for denunciation is impossible without a commitment to transform, and there is no transformation without action. On the other hand, if action is emphasized exclusively to the detriment of reflection, the word is converted into activism. The latter, action for action's sake, negates the true praxis and makes dialogue impossible. Either dichotomy, by creating unauthentic forms of existence, creates also unauthentic forms of thought, which reinforce the original dichotomy. So let us stop here at the first two paragraphs, right? because he is trying to teach us about the significance of dialogue. A dialogue is always between two entities. You can't have a dialogue with yourself. That would be a monologue. So that means there is always an exchange, equal exchange between two entities. Now that then brings us to the medium of a dialogue. Of course, it's language, it's the word, right, Handy? And then he tells us that there are two constitutive elements of the word. Now, you can come to it through J.L. Austin and others, how to do things with words. It's that theory of language. But reflection and action both are constitutive parts of the word, right? Remember, reflection and action also is how he defines a praxis, right? So what he's saying is that if you render one constitutive part inert or silent, then you are not necessarily using an authentic word, an authentic language. So remember, the concept of the authentic, as we have discussed throughout, it's not essential authentic, right? But authentic, whenever he uses that term, what he means, it's something that is true to transformation, to change, but also true to bringing our full humanity forward. That is what he means by authentic. So now if we rob the word of action, right, it becomes mere verbalism. What are some examples of that? I mean, think of any politicians, especially the populist ones, right? They can promise us, I will change this, I will do that, right? But if those promises are not backed by actions, right, then it is mere verbalism, it is rhetoric, right? It is they trying to sell us something that doesn't transform the world. Even on a higher scale, all these acts of charity, right, performed by powerful nations in the world, we'll send you a malaria vaccine, we'll do this. This is action, right? But it's without reflection, right? Because if it had both action and reflection, then what they would think about is, let us change this world. Let us create a world in which people don't need charity, right? So that's what he's trying to highlight. So mere verbalism, already we know, if there is no action behind the words, if the action part of the word is silenced, all you have is empty words. That's the phrase we use. When do we tell someone, all you have, you are just talk, or he is just talk? That means that this person can speak a good deal, right? But cannot back it up with some actions, right? So action and reflection are part of the word, right? Now, how does mere action without reflection become problematic? So first of all, look, what Freire is also trying to teach us is how to bring about a revolutionary moment in the world without the revolutionaries themselves becoming oppressive, right? That's his project. So if you perform revolutionary action without reflection, then just the act of performing that act becomes something that you take pride in, something that you think is the end in itself. I have quite a few progressive friends, right, who go and participate in protests and everything else, which I think are absolutely important. But then they start shaming other people for not doing what they do. They start judging other people for not being actively engaged, right? So that means that their actions, just the act of protesting for them, has become an end in itself. And that is what he's calling here, mere activism with no transformative power, right? So the significance of dialogue, and then dialogue's dependency on the word. The constitutive elements of the word are action and reflection. accounting for both in any revolutionary movement then becomes crucial, right? Let's read a little more. Human existence cannot be silent, nor can it be nourished by false words, but only true words with which men and women transform the world. To exist humanly is to name the world, to change it, right? Once named, the word in its turn reappears to the namers as a problem and requires of them a new naming. Human beings are not built in silence, but in word, in work, in action, reflection. Let us look at that footnote. Number 3. What he's saying is, I obviously do not refer to the silence of profound, and I'll have to read it from my book. He says, I obviously do not refer to the silence of profound meditation in which men only apparently leave the world, withdrawing from it in order to consider it in its totality and thus remaining with it. But this type of retreat is only authentic when the mediator is bathed in reality, not when the retreat signifies contempt for the world and flight from it in a type of historical schizophrenia. So what we learn here is pretty important. I mean, we already know, those of us who have studied linguistics and or even language theory, we know that we are born in language. So we are born with words. And words in so many ways also determine our humanity. We are not silent beings. In Arabic, for example, human beings are called hayawanun natiq, the animal that speaks, right? And so much of what we do, our rationality is connected to that speech, right? And so it is unnatural for human beings to be silent, right? But we already know how he has defined the word, action and praxis. So what is this naming of the word? I mean, that's deeply philosophical, but it can also be explained in simplistic terms. How do we name the word? I mean, look around yourself. This word has already been named. We have vocabularies that go with it. People are consumers, right? People are job creators, right? So because of that naming, the word has normalized itself. The capitalist word has normalized itself, and it can offer itself as natural. What if we renamed it, right? What if we called it an unjust word? What if we called it a cruel word, right? But using those words in dialogue with others, then we reflected on it. What is it that makes it unjust? What is it that makes it an unkind world, right? And then action, after we have named it for what it is, right? Then we go into the second phase of transforming it, right? But the naming of the truth of the word is essential. Think of it this way: anyone who lives in any ideology, when is it that their identity will come to a crisis moment? Because the only way they will abandon that ideology is when they find the truth about it, right? Its oppressive nature. So the job then is increasingly, with dialogue with other people, is to transform the world. And the world can only be transformed if we have the vocabularies to transform it. Those vocabularies, those words must have the two constituent elements, right? Reflection and action, right? And when they have that, then we must figure out in dialogue a way to rename the world, give it a new name, right? But before we do that, we must first name what it is, right? Because once we have named it, then we know we have to change it, right? That's the subtle point that he's trying to make over here. Next paragraph, I will just read it and then we'll talk more about it. But while to say the true word which is work, which is praxis, so those are the two constituent elements of the word, is to transform the word, saying that word is not the privilege of some few persons, but the right of everyone. Consequently, no one can say a true word alone, nor can she say it for another in a prescriptive act which robs others of their words. Now, this is a really crucial paragraph. Okay, so let me say it again. But while to say the true word, which is work, which is praxis, is to transform the word, right? Saying the true word, naming the word for what it is. Now, that is an act of transforming the word, but we also must be cautious that the word must have the two constitutive elements. It must have reflection and it must have action in it. But what we also must not do is think that only certain people have the power to utter words, right? So we can't assign this role to an elite. May they be revolutionary leaders or may they be our capitalist masters. No. The basic assumption is that every single person came to this world as a speaking subject and has the right to say things about the world. So we must acknowledge that everyone is an active participant in this transformation of the world. You cannot have a hierarchy, may it be socialist or conservative. There cannot be one person or a group of people telling everyone else what to do. No. Everyone must be a participant in this act of naming the word and speaking the word, right? No one can say a true word alone, nor can she say it for another. That is also an important thing, is that no one should, of course, think that they alone can change the world and they have the vocabulary for it, but also they must not speak for others. They must not say, I'm here to speak for the indigenous people. I'm a middle class guy, right? No, they must speak in solidarity with others, not for them, because when you speak for a constituency without their consent or even without their equal voice in it, then you've appropriated their right to speak. So not speaking for a constituency, but especially not in a way where you tell them what to do. So I'm going to stop here today. I want to keep it brief. So chapter 3 starts with emphasis on dialogue. What dialogue entails is a conversation with others. For that, we use words. The word has two constitutive elements, work and reflection, which makes it praxis, right? If you rob reflection out of it, it becomes mere activism with no substance, activism for activism's sake, right? If you take action out of it, it becomes empty verbalism, right? In order to have the authentic word that has both the constitutive elements must be offered in dialogue with others, right? In naming the word for what it is. And once you have named it, what does it mean? Like, okay, knowing the word as to what it is, its hierarchies, its injustices, everything, right? Because once you have brought that about, then you can set to transform it. And for that also you will need new vocabularies, right? But there are certain things that must restrain us. One, we cannot take it upon ourselves to speak for everyone else. We must only speak with others. And we cannot create a system in which some people, an avant-garde or communist party or some other vanguard, takes over the job of speaking the word from the people. No, it will have to be a collective effort in which everyone is participant, because the basic assumption is that all human beings are speaking subjects. So Keep in mind, we have been running this theme throughout this discussion. The project is humanization, right? Everyone's realization of a full humanity, right? Dismantling of the oppressive system, right? Teaching ourselves how we have internalized that system, right? Developing a kind of education that encourages that kind of dialogue, that asks questions, that teaches us to solve the problems in a non-hierarchical manner, right? The purpose is to change the world in which everyone can realize their full human potential, but also to safeguard against the oppressed themselves becoming oppressors. That is one of the crucial part of this book. People often ask this problem of Marxism and others. Here is where Freire is actually trying to teach us as to how to change the world, but change it in a way that those who have succeeded do not replicate the hierarchies, the policies and actions of those that they have just replaced. That is why in the next few paragraphs, he will go to love and its significance for revolution. We'll come to that in the next lecture. Until then, I hope this is useful to you. Please let me know what you think, and whenever possible, post your comments. Let me know if I missed anything or if you would like to add anything to it. Thank you so much. Take care. And as always, peace and love.